Welcome back to the JLL Coaching Pod. Hope you're having a good day. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are talking about exercise selection. Now this is a bit of a rogue topic because exercise selection can feed into 100 different categories, and it can involve all different types of training. So I'm going to talk about a few principles and how I go about my thinking with exercise selection for myself and with a client or for a program. And hopefully you guys can get something away from that and join the conversation. Comment, email me, whatever, slide in the DMs and we can have a little chat. Just going to have a little sip of coffee. Chinese coffee. First one actually ever from Chinese. I would say it is unique in that polite British way of it's not that good. Not gonna lie to you, but it's silky, it's smooth because the milk is a banger. We'll get it in and we'll just enjoy the caffeine ride. Exercise selection, things to consider. Now, for me, the main thing is the outcome. Like, what are you trying to work on? What is the goal here? What is the purpose of your training, the training session, this part of the training session? And what's the objective? You of course have things like fun to take into consideration, but in my opinion, most of the time with training, you want it to serve a purpose. And you're going to have different outcomes. So everything you do will naturally have a variety of trade-offs. You just bench pressing for a 1 rep max every time you go into the gym. Yes, it will probably help you get stronger. You'll probably get better at lifting a 1 rep bench press weight, but that will have secondary and tertiary consequences. So those all need to be taken into consideration when we are choosing exercises to use. And this will change for a warm-up exercise, for a main exercise, all based on these outcomes. So your outcomes could be to build muscle. Are you trying to develop some tissue, get some aesthetic, thick quadriceps? Or it could be to get you stronger. As I just said, that bench press example, these could be a couple of the qualities. Are you trying to become more mobile? Are you trying to create space somewhere in your body where you don't currently have space? Maybe you're experiencing a little bit of pain, discomfort, and you want to get out of that. That could be a primary outcome, secondary or tertiary, for an exercise selection. Are you trying to improve your coordination for sport? Have you just done isolated isolations, say like quad extension machines, hamstring curl machines, and bicep curls your whole life, and you can barely walk properly because you've never actually walked? So coordination is something else. Are you trying to be powerful? And powerful could be split down into 2 different ways. Are you trying to throw a fast punch, a light bit of power, nice and explosive? Or do you need to move a bale of hay quickly across a field? Heavy power. Are you a Olympic weightlifter, lifting a good amount of weight quickly? It's coffee. It's going down a treat. But those are a few like outcomes that you could be searching for. And what we'll talk about is how like one thing will always have trade-offs and influence the others. We are a complex dynamic system of systems, and everything we do will have a consequence on something else. Other things you want to consider when you're talking about these outcomes is how stimulating is this? How fatiguing is this exercise? How am I feeling today? Like, what's going on in my life? Do I have the space for this? Will this ruin my day? Will this make my day better? Those kinds of things, short-term, long-term. Everything needs to be considered with exercise selection. It's a huge part of the puzzle, but you need to have your programming and your movement model principles in order first to help you with this decision-making process of exercise selection. So for me, the primary, secondary, tertiary outcomes are the priority. And what I mean by that is the stimulus or the adaptations I'm trying to cause are going to be the main priority with the exercise I choose. So for example, in a warm-up, say for example, the main outcome for someone is to build a bit of muscle, get a bit stronger throughout the whole body. Try and do that without creating too much pain, or none ideally, and feel good, move well, and that's the kind of main objective. So typically then, when I'm starting the session, say typically the normal person is probably missing some kind of range of motion somewhere in some part of their body. They could be hypermobile in their limbs, but their pelvis, rib cage, and feet might not move at all, for example. So typically, everybody is kind of looking for a bit of mobility somewhere, and that's kind of where a warm-up could be a good time to kind of work on those, accessing that space, accessing a new range of motion, because at the end of the day, if you want to build muscle, if you want to get stronger in a variety of positions, you need to be able to access those positions to lengthen tissues. If joints can't go through a full range of motion in the three planes in the three planes, you will limit the amount of tissue that you can actually build. So someone's want to build a lot of muscle, I'd probably start with choosing exercises for a warm-up that help them regain a little bit more mobility in that target area of the day, while also getting their body temperature up, getting them ready to move, getting their mind right, getting them ready for the work that's about to come. And then when you go and choose your exercise selection for your main work, once you're warm, once you're ready to go, there are a few things. This is where you're going to kind of dive into the next set of ideas. So stability is a principle here that you can definitely take into consideration. If hypertrophy is the main outcome, first of all, you need to decide what your main outcome you're looking towards. I'll go through hypertrophy just for an example. If hypertrophy is the main outcome, stability is something you would consider with regards to, are you going to use a machine or free weights? A machine typically has more stability, and the way I'll define stability is the amount of your body that's in contact with something that cannot be moved. For example, if you're lying on the ground, you have way more of your body in contact with something that can't be moved, the ground, versus if you're just standing. Because then you've just got your feet versus your whole body lying on the ground. So that is a example of stability. So for example, when you are using a barbell, say you're doing a barbell bent over row, you have your feet planted on the ground, you have your hands around a barbell, the rest of your body is free in space to move. So there's a high level of stability required there to stabilize your body, to hold it in space, to fight against gravity. Whereas if you are doing a chest supported row, machine row, where you've kind of sat your butt down in a comfortable, stable chair, you've got your feet up on their stand, your chest is supported, you don't really have to fight against gravity in terms of staying upright or staying on your feet. You can be supported heavily by this machine. So you've got significantly more stability on a machine versus free weights. Now, what consequences does that have for something like hypertrophy? So choosing a chest supported row machine versus a barbell row will likely lead to improved hypertrophy gains in the long term. The reasoning there is when you are more stable, your body knows that. You've got less things to worry about. You don't have the trade-off of supporting yourself up if a machine is in there to do that for you. You can use less momentum from other tissues, which enables you to focus on that targeted tissues, which would be your back, biceps, rear delts, versus kind of holding yourself up with your hip musculature, your hamstrings, your core muscles, your abs are going to be working to hold you in space there. If you're doing a barbell row, you can just sit down, you've got a higher level of stability. And what a higher level of stability is shown in the literature with regards to hypertrophy training is a higher recruitment of muscle tissues. It allows you to create a bit more mechanical tension within the cells, and that is one of the main leaders of hypertrophy stimulus, of getting a good adaptation. So that's one of the main arguments for why you would use a machine over a free weight when it comes to your exercise selection, if your main outcome is hypertrophy. But, and there is always a but, there will be secondary and tertiary consequences of all of this, naturally. One of them to consider would be coordination, stimulus to fatigue ratio. You have a higher level of coordination between different tissues in your body doing a barbell bent over row versus doing a chest supported row. Now, if your main outcome that you're looking for is hypertrophy, to build muscle, you should probably choose the machine. But if you want your body to work together and you want to build some muscle, but you also care about your system working in coordination together and moving well together, you probably wouldn't be upset with that slight trade-off of hypertrophy for the advantage of coordination. But again, there is more to this. So another thing to consider is the fatigue involved. Stimulus to your central nervous system will be different if you're doing a free weights exercise like the barbell bent over row compared to the chest supported row. You will probably be able to accumulate more volume with a close proximity to failure in a chest supported row without fatiguing the hell out of your system. This is due to less muscles being required, less coordination throughout your body, less central nervous system fatigue, because you're literally just fewer parts of you need to work. So you can really dial in on that one area and you'll get a higher overall level of stimulus in that local tissue versus the central fatigue that you'll accumulate from the exercise. So again, these are like fundamental things to think about when you are going through exercise selection. The more you understand the body, the better your biomechanics understanding is. The more you can have fun here and play around with different exercise and get the secondary benefits. My favorite example here is definitely mobility. I'm just going to take a light sip of coffee. That wasn't a light sip, that was pretty big. So this has been like an exciting thing for me to discover last year. Light power, throwing a punch, throwing a ball. Do you play cricket? Do you play tennis? Do you do a sport where you need to move something light at high speeds? Because if you do, you're probably going to work on light power. Do you do something that exposes you to a variety of different positions and ranges of motion? Do you need good mobility? You can get both at the same time. So I love med balls. Med balls can be used to develop things such as light power, because you can get a light med ball and you can launch it against a wall and you can work on that light power, that kind of coordination in your body to create that power and work on mobility at the same time, just with a variety of different setups. And what I mean by this is take a half kneeling wall ball throw where you're kind of scooping to the side. This is going to be hard to talk about actually, so I'm not going to go into too much depth here, but you can basically bias an exercise to improve internal or external rotation at the hips or a variety of different joints by setting yourself up in a position that biases an internal rotation of the hips. You need to internally rotate your hips to get a good med ball throw going. You can see this on my Instagram. I'm always throwing balls. And that will also, so you're going to get light power. You're going to get that explosive, quick, light work, but you're also going to get a nice bit of mobility in there as well. So you're going to hit two birds with one stone, and it's going to be a really nice way to do that. Same thing with hypertrophy. So, for example, say you are lacking a bit of shoulder overhead mobility, and potentially you need to be in a nice overhead position for the sport you play or for the demands of your life. For example, you go traveling a lot. You want to put that luxurious suitcase that you've spent way too much on to travel with into that overhead locker. You got to clean it up onto the shoulder. Everyone's watching, they're impressed. You drive that suitcase with precise precision overhead, but you don't have the overhead mobility. You don't have the shoulder flexion mobility, and you crumble and die, and it's embarrassing. So you probably want that overhead mobility to put that suitcase in the locker, in that overhead locker, without dying. You can both develop biceps, triceps, deltoids, and improve that overhead mobility. So that shoulder flexion, you need to work on the relationship between your humerus, scapula, clavicle, and rib cage. All of these things will dictate how high you can get your hand overhead. If you're watching the video, I'm swinging my hand over the head. There's loads of bones that interact to help that happen. We want those scaps to be moving freely through a great range of motion alongside the back of the rib cage. Now, often with arm training, we can just go around and be like, I'm just going to do bicep curls standing and throwing the weight up. But if you put yourself in a position where you can get those scaps to move and simultaneously train the biceps, you'll both get an outcome of hypertrophizing the biceps, getting them bigger, creating a stimulus, and improving that relationship with the scapula and the rib cage, aka improving your shoulder mobility while making hypertrophy gains. So this is where like levels of programming and exercise selection get deeper and deeper and deeper when you start to understand the relationships between different systems in the body, between different physical qualities, and how you can bias some versus others. So a lot of people hate traditional mobility training. Who wants to hang around stretching for 20-30 minutes? Some people will find that relaxing. Others won't. That's fine. Whatever. But imagine just being able to do something you love, like train your arms, like a lot of people do, or even train your glutes, or even just train any body part and simultaneously improve your mobility. Now that just comes down to good understanding of biomechanics. Sorry for interrupting the pod. I'm just here to advertise the programs. A couple programs in the link in the bio, in the link tree. Hypertrophy program if you want to get jacked out of your nut, and the fundamentals program if you're a bit bored of your training, you want to mix it up, you're fed up of just lifting weights in the gym and you want to come a little bit more athletic. Dive in to the link tree and get involved now. And how the body moves, how a joint should go through a range of motion in all three planes of motion, whilst also simultaneously understanding how to stimulate the targeted physical quality that we're looking for. And this is basically what physiotherapy is, what performance is, this relationship, this spectrum of pain to performance, injury to performance. It is putting together a program, selecting exercises that help regain positions that you don't currently have and developing qualities in that range, in that position. So this is exciting stuff, if you ask me. And a great opportunity for you to want to pursue a better understanding of biomechanics. So you cannot just be like, all right, we're going to bench today to improve the chest. Well, how about we raise the feet up? we raise the feet up on a box when we are bench pressing, that will probably have zero negative effect on the hypertrophy stimulus. I'm not going to say zero. It's going to have a small negative effect on the hypertrophy stimulus, potentially, initially, raising the feet up, but it might also have a positive consequence on mobility. Now, this is a weird thing to think about, and not that many people are doing it, but when you are doing a exercise such as a dumbbell bench press, a dumbbell shoulder press, a machine chest press, some kind of pushing exercise. This can be talked about for pulling as well, but we're going to talk about it for pushing. So when exercise, you can adapt an exercise to work on those secondary and tertiary outcomes. So talking about the bench press, I sometimes with some of my clients, I will raise their feet up. Typically, you'll be on a bench, the feet go down to the floor. You can raise the level that their feet are at, put them up on some boxes, and that will have some different outcomes, some different trade-offs for that individual. When you raise your legs up from the floor, you are changing where your center of mass is in relation to your base of support. So naturally, just raising your legs will have consequences elsewhere in your body. Now, I've already spoken about this relationship with the rib cage and the scapula. Raising your legs up when you're bench pressing, putting them up on a box, will send your center of mass back. Center of mass, you can typically, it's L4, L5 in your lumbar, just around your belly button, behind your belly button. That is where your center of mass is. If we raise a bit part of your legs up, then typically something else has to move back to compensate to... It's just a strategy so you don't fall over and die. You need to make adjustments to balance effectively. So when we raise the feet up, what that does is that pushes the rib cage back. It actually enables the lumbar spine to be in a more neutral position. So it's not in a huge amount of extension or hyperextension, which is quite typical on a bench press. You can raise that up so you've got a nice curve in your thoracic spine, and then when you're benching, those scapulars can run around the rib cage, and you can maintain a really nice scapular rib cage relationship. And again, you're benching, you're getting a hypertrophy stimulus, but you're also working on mobility. Now, how much of a touch is that? That is just like revolutionary. A little bit of sparkling water in the veins. So this is where you can kind of think about exercise selection and start to adjust machines, start to adjust exercises to bias different physical qualities. So it's more than just I'm just going to go to the gym and get big. Well, would you also like to be able to put that suitcase in the overhead locker without pain? 100%, you probably would. So should you also just sometimes do some exercises that get those scapulars moving around the rib cage nicely? Probably. How do you do that? Understand biomechanics, lift the feet when you're doing a bench press. Same thing goes for back exercises. You can get your feet raised up in front of you. That will create that nice round rib cage. And what's that? That will improve the hypertrophy stimulus because the lats attached to the rib cage, you'll get a greater stretch in those end ranges. So you'll get a nice huge lengthened contraction, lengthened stimulus under load, probably a greater length when your rib cage is rounded because you've got those feet up in front of you. That will create a better stimulus there, and you'll also improve that relationship of scapula, rib cage, clavicle, humerus moving through space. So what I'm saying is there's levels to the game of exercise selection. You've got things to think about like stability, center of mass, base of support, how changing those things will have a consequence elsewhere in your body with regards to what's going on with the joints and the bones. Naturally, I love to think of things like, and this is from Bill Hartman, that there are no solutions. There's no absolute solutions with exercise selection or with anything. There are only trade-offs. Now, this is freeing in a way because it doesn't particularly say in the gym that some things are better or worse. They just serve a different purpose at that time. And naturally, everyone's going to be in the gym looking for some slightly different outcome. We're only talking about like physical qualities here, nothing about just like mental enjoyment or anything like that. Obviously, having a bit of variation in your training is good crack. Like, you don't just want to do the same exercises forever. But that's not the purpose of this conversation right now. I've just completely lost where I was there. Let me take a little sip of sparkling water. Yes, so with exercise selection as well, when we're wanting to target a specific set of tissues, particularly when you get to like elite bodybuilders and things like that, or very specific physio, you want to bias a certain type of tissue. For example, say you have a lot of range of motion. Do a side bend. You're standing straight. You're nice and upright, and you reach to the side, one side to the right, one side to the left. And say, for example, you can go much further down on your right side than you can on your left. Your left hip is very long on the outside laterally. Your left lateral hip is very long, and your right hip is very short, because you can bend further down on the right side, but you can't bend on the left. There's nowhere to go. That probably means you want to open up that right side of the hip to create a bit of range of motion there, maybe develop the tissues that are chronically shortened and therefore probably won't be able to get a nice, good stimulus. That tissue might be visibly smaller. If you look at your legs, your arms, you're probably going to have one side longer, stronger, bigger than the other. Asymmetry is natural in the human body. You're never going to be perfectly symmetrical. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue it, and that's a bit about what this conversation is about. So say you've got one side that's chronically shorter for whatever reason, you might want to create length through that tissue. So then an exercise selection for this could be, as your warm-up, you do a single arm farmer's carry. You just hold it in the left arm to kind of bring that right side length through that right side as you go for a single arm farmer's carry, and that'll bring length through that right side. And then when you go and train something like the glutes, the hips, that lateral hip might have more space to move into. Just an example of how you might start thinking about setting up your training and choosing exercises in your warm-ups that might benefit your main section later on. And that goes down to assessment, how you see people moving, what areas they have access to, areas they don't have access to, and then biasing the warm-up to balance that out a little bit, create that space for them to then go and work in when they're doing their kind of strength training through a greater range or whatever it could be. Whatever physical quality you are pursuing, you probably want to open them up for that range. So creating that relative motion at a joint rather than just moving the whole thing, rather than just orientating the skeleton, we're looking for relative motion at different areas in order to kind of pursue symmetry for aesthetics, for health, whatever you want to call it. But these are a few, honestly, this was just a fun conversation about exercise selection for me. I enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you're having a good day, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.